There was an incident that happened at a college campus where a young man was accosted by a woman and accused of cultural appropriation. I think there's a lot of confusion as to what that is. Cultural appropriation doesn't mean anytime you see somebody using something or being influenced by another culture that that is cultural appropriation. Sometimes it's totally valid. But if you're borrowing from a culture, using something from a culture to exploit them, to rob them of money, to misrepresent yourself, to be disrespectful, then it is. And the first name that comes to mind when I think of cultural appropriation is Pat Boone. Pat Boone took songs that black musicians were singing and using back in the day, and all he did was regurgitate them and got rich off of that. Now, that was definitely cultural appropriation. I can think of other times when that's true. The young man who was accosted mentioned it. That people wear Indian headdresses, where those are sacred objects in their culture, and you take something that's sacred and you just use it as if it's common, and you sell it on the market. I can think back to ancient times in the Bible how the people who had kidnapped and taken the Jews out of their land, they took the sacred objects that were used in temple worship and sat around drinking out of them like they were just common beer steins. That's cultural appropriation. But what I want you to think about is another example: jazz musicians. You think of Louis Armstrong and Miles Davis. They're taking instruments that were invented and used in Europe, and they're using them to play a whole different art form on them. Is that cultural appropriation? I would say no, because especially in the arts, you can't really think of appropriation in that sense. Whether it's arts like culinary arts, or whether it's arts like music, people are going to be influenced by each other, and that's what's known as cultural fusion. Whenever two cultures come in contact with each other, that's going to happen. It has nothing to do with appropriation. It has to do with appreciation. You see something somebody else is doing, you develop an appreciation for it. In cooking, you develop a taste for it, and you start to try it. You think of the banjo. The banjo is uh, not influence, but has the origin. It's an instrument that has the origins in Africa completely. But in today's world, it's mostly Caucasian musicians that play it. And that's not appropriation in my mind. That's just a trend. And appropriation has a lot to do with time frame as well, because popcorn, for example, is something Native Americans ate. But now you go to every theater in America and they're serving popcorn. Is that appropriation? No, because in the time frame, things have shifted. The same could be said of jazz. Most of the great jazz musicians are not black people anymore, even though that is a black art form, African American art form for sure. So, cultural fusion is inevitable, whether you're wearing dreadlocks in your hair or whether it's a white person who plays the banjo. It's going to happen. And unless it's disrespectful or exploitive, it's really cultural fusion that's taking place. Um, whether it's aesthetics or whether it's culture, one of the best examples that I can think of is in Italian cooking. You take a sauce that's based on tomatoes from America. You take noodles that came from China, and suddenly it becomes an Italian dish. That's cultural fusion. And to try to get up in somebody's face and tell them that they're guilty of a cultural appropriation when they eat in an Italian restaurant, is that valid? No, it isn't. And cultural fusion is something we need to accept because it's just a part of the way life is, the way society works, the way cultures work. And we should embrace it and not try to see it as offensive.